when you step back from your life and you articulate succinctly, here's exactly the person I want to be, exactly what I want to accomplish, and precisely how I'm going to achieve my clearly defined goals. And then you feed that to yourself every day. After about 21 days, the magic happens, the science, the human mind kicks in, and what you're feeding yourself starts showing up automatically without thinking in your daily actions. And those enhanced, improved daily actions create the life you want. I mean, it's powerfully simple.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Rich Your Soul. Today's guest is John Mitchell, who's going to share how to think and grow rich and his secret of how spending just 12 minutes a day helped him earn over $5 million. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Rich Your Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richyoursoul.com. Today's quote is from Joseph Campbell. We're not on a journey to save the world, but to save ourselves. But in doing that, you save the world. The influence of a vital person vitalizes. This is a secret that so many struggle with. We all want everyone else to change. But who raises their hand and says, let me change? Words are nice, but people follow action. So be the person you want the world to be. That's simple. One way to do that is to turn off the noise, go inside, and do the work. And that was last week's action step. Turn off the noise, the phone, the computer, the TV. I highly recommend this. This is going to come up on the next few episodes. Trying to find the quiet in the stillness. Because this is where great ideas are born. This is where interchange takes place. I know I continue to work on this. I'm trying to create even bigger blocks of quiet. Now with spring here, more time outside, now that it's warm weather, I'm excited. I find nature and quiet do amazing for me. The secrets to success are available to everyone, but sometimes there's something missing, or it just isn't clear, or we don't know how we can do it. And I hope today we can bring you clarity with that. And you can think and grow rich. John Mitchell is a serial entrepreneur, and he's created the top application in the world on the top book in the world on success, Think and Grow Rich. It's been read by over 100 million people worldwide. It is the top book in the world on a success factor by 10. But here's what's interesting. The book says there's a secret for creating success, but the author, Napoleon Hill, only gives you half the secret. John is here to give us the full secret and a 12-minute-a-day technique to apply it. This technique caused his own income to go to $5 million a year after 20 years in the low six figures. Let's meet John and figure out how he did it. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, John Mitchell. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Boy, that's a great question. When I was growing up, we were very middle class, did not have a lot of money, and parents sent me to private school when they probably couldn't afford it. And so money was tight, and we had sort of the mindset that we need more money, as I remember.
Well, and I think that's pretty typical. And a lot of parents do make a lot of sacrifices for their kids, and they want the best for them. I guess it's a question of how much is too much, right?
Yeah, right.
You're never particularly sure. But one of the things I think we found is most kids, like the kids' expectations are totally opposite of the parents. Like they don't see it the same way because they don't have any reference point.
Right. I remember my parents saying, "What do you think? Money grows on trees?" And I bet you heard that too, didn't you?
I have heard that. So how did that affect you?
I don't know that it materially affected me other than money was hard to come by, maybe.
In that sense, when you were older, you thought money was hard to come by.
Maybe I can best explain it by just sort of giving you my story because it relates to maybe that whole money thing. And you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
I started out as a CPA, which sort of money oriented. Then when I became 30, I became an entrepreneur. And for the next 20 years, I was, in like 7 different businesses. And I consistently made $200,000 or $300,000 a year. And so when I got to be 50, I just wasn't as successful as I thought I should be. And I had 2 goals in my life. One is to net 7 figures a year. As materialistic as that sounds, I saw that netting 6 figures a year would not give me the exceptional life, and it would not give me freedom. And so it was clear that I had to net 7. And I also had the goal of finding the woman of my dreams, and I was falling short on that as well. I'd never been married at 50, although I must say I did a lot of interviewing. And although my friends would probably call it begging, I like to call it interviewing. But, at 50, I just wasn't as successful as I thought I should be. And so I'm like, well, how do I change this? And then it comes to me probably 3 months after I turned 50, go find the top book of the world on success and apply that book literally word for word to my life. And so I did a little research, and to my surprise, I see there's one book that's been read by 100 million people, and the next best-selling book has been read by less than 10 million people. And that book is Think and Grow Rich. And I know you probably read it, right?
I have.
Right. Once I saw that it was the top book in the world on success by a factor of 10, I'm like, this is perfect. I'm like a heat-seeking missile. I go and buy the book the next day, and so I dig into it, and then I see the problem. The author says there's a secret for success, but he only gives you half of the secret. Well, I mope around for probably 3 weeks, and then one day I woke up and I go, John, just man up and figure out the secret. And so I just immerse myself in the book for a couple of months, and I figure out the full secret and a 12-minute-a-day technique to apply it. And quickly my income starts doubling in a new business I'm in the reverse mortgage business, to the point where 4 years later I was blessed to be netting $5 million a year, which was 25 times what I'd ever made in the prior 20 years. And what was cool was I could see why it was working. Like for the first time ever, I was proactively influencing my autopilot, and I could just do things I could never do before, and it was happening automatically without thinking. And it truly felt like having a superpower, because I was just playing the game of life at a higher level. And And Rocky, to explain why it worked is because I was focused only on what moves the needle. I tripled my discipline, and I had new ideas come into my head consistently every week. And again, all that was happening automatically. But I think the coolest thing about it all was I had this immense sense of control over my life to a level I'd never experienced before. And so to wrap it up, I just became fascinated by the fact that you could take two key scientific principles and apply them to your life and just so materially impact your success and achievement in life. And so I ended up selling my company once I had enough money to not have to work. And probably a couple months after I sold it, I meet the former chancellor and president at the University of Texas and tell him my story. And he says, "Hey, you got to teach this at Texas, and why don't we teach it together?" And this was like 7 years ago. So that started the journey for sharing it with the world.
So a couple of things come to mind. Number one, you said you were making a couple $100,000 a year, but yet you weren't thrilled. What was that all about?
I wanted freedom. And I saw that for some reason it cost me a couple of $100,000 a year just to live, which is sort of staggering when you factor in that I was single and I didn't have an opulent lifestyle. I lived in a $350,000 house, and but I couldn't get real traction until by the time I turned 50, I saw that I can't get traction unless I'm netting over $1 million, and so that really became clear. And so I saw I had to change what I was doing.
That makes sense. You said there were two key principles.
Right.
What were the two key principles?
The first one is that 95% of your daily actions are unconscious. And think about this, Rocky. If that's true, the only way that you can have a higher level of success is to influence those unconscious daily actions. I mean, it's pure math. But here's the thing I would share with you about that. We hear facts all the time, and we don't know if they're true or they're not true. And if you and I Googled that, what percentage of my daily actions are unconscious, in big dark letters, it would say 95%. But let me ask you a question. Do you buy that's true?
I do, because I realize it, and I might even say it's a little low.
Right. Well, and think about this. This is something I've been sort of cogitating about lately, that there's like a couple of levels of getting something. You and I can intellectually get that idea. We get it. But the next level of really getting it is, how does that impact your life? And how does that impact your life that 95% of your daily actions are unconscious?
How does that impact my life?
Right.
So I challenge the things I do, and I'm always trying to improve them.
Right.
And certain things for me are non-negotiable. And they've been programmed non-negotiable. So for example, I know I'm getting older, so I need to work out. And I know that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I go to the gym. I know exactly what I do on Mondays and Fridays, and Wednesdays gives me a little flexibility. I know Tuesdays and Thursdays, if I'm going to be lifting heavy at the gym, then I need to do something to stretch. And so I put a routine in place where I don't have to think. I just go execute, and I know this is what's going to happen. I'm pretty meticulous on watching my weight, what I eat, and I track all of this stuff. Everything gets measured.
Right.
Our financial life is all measured. Our personal life and our business is all managed within software. So we know what our numbers are. We know what the results are, and we're tracking everything. And then I'm part of mastermind groups where, every few weeks I'm man in the middle. I lay it out, and they call me out, or they say, hey, these are your shortcomings, and because of those, you're doing X. So you got to improve this.
Right.
And then, as you see, I constantly read. So
Right.
I'm always trying to figure out what's the one more thing I can add, what's one thing I can change, what's one point of view that no longer meets me that I should put time and effort into.
Well, I think you said it when you said you program yourself. That's, I think, the essence of what this is really all about is if 95% of your daily actions are unconscious, you have to program yourself so you influence those unconscious daily actions. And that's something that most people don't really know how to do, I've discovered. But I in my story, I mentioned that it feels like a superpower. And I'll give you an example of that, if I may. And this happened, not too long ago. It was around Christmas, and I was going to go see one of my clients in San Antonio, which is about an hour from Austin. And so I'm out and about. My wife's going to go with me. She's out and about, and I tell her to meet me at Starbucks. And so we're going to meet at 2:00, and I get there a little early, and I decided to have a brownie. So I'm eating that brownie, and in my 12-minute-a-day technique, I program myself. I'm aware of everything I put in my mouth. Well, I'm aware of it, and I'm aware that it doesn't taste very good, but I keep on eating it. And so Ginger comes, and we jump in my car, and I notice I don't feel very good. I've certainly lost my appetite. And so I come home, and that night I change my visualization template to say I evaluate everything I put in my mouth. So I change one word from aware to evaluate. Well, the next night, Ginge and I go and have Mexican food with her son, and I order tacos. Well, the tacos come. They're not very good, except this time I'm evaluating everything I put in my mouth, and I just slide those tacos away and did it automatically without thinking. And then that night I'm laying in bed and I'm like, wow, that is a superpower. If you can control your autopilot so that you take the right actions and it happens automatically without thinking, that is a superpower. And again, it's just influencing those unconscious daily actions.
It is, and I like how it's simple, right? It's one word that makes the change.
Right. Well, keep in mind, and you're doing something that is influencing your autopilot, and I'll bet it's working. But here's the thing that I've sort of come to realize that we really have two fundamental problems. All of us have two fundamental problems. The first one is that we're innately wired for survival, which causes us to be fear-based, reactive, and negative. And Rocky, of course, that was great 5,000 years ago when there was danger around every corner. I mean, you wanted to be reactive and fear-based, but it's exactly the opposite of how you need to be in the modern world if you want to be creative, productive, and happy. And so that's the first thing. And then the second sort of issue is what we just said, that 95% of your daily actions are unconscious. And so what that really means is that when you open your eyes each morning, you're on autopilot most today, innately wired to be fear-based and reactive. And the effect of that is it causes you to play the game of life at 20% of your potential. And if you're a driven person, that's a big problem, and you got to fix it.
Well, and so part of that is we're designed for survival. We're not designed for happiness.
Exactly.
And that is why that is. So our body and our life is designed to do that. Survival's the key. Being happy or sad just isn't. I mean, I guess back when we were designed, all of these things were not the case, right? It was just, hey, do you have enough food? Can you procreate?
Right, right.
That was kind of what we were designed for. So the rest of these things, it's modern day problems, I guess.
Well, think about this. So, I mean, you're right. We're innately wired not to be happy, but that doesn't mean we can't be happy. It just means we have to program happiness. We have to overlay a programming that's different than that survival programming. And that's essentially what this 12-minute-a-day technique does. And it's sort of based on, this is how the human mind works. The conscious mind sets the intention and is influenced by logic, and the subconscious mind controls your everyday actions. And as an example of that, let's say you want to lose weight. Well, the conscious mind sets the intention based on the logic of the health benefits. But the actual actions of losing weight, the controlling what you eat and exercising, is controlled by the subconscious mind, which is only influenced by repetition. It doesn't care about logic. And so the reason most people struggle with losing weight is not from that lack of intention, but lack of influencing their daily actions of eating and exercising. And again, that part of the brain that controls your actions is only influenced by repetition. That's why your morning routine, if it's done properly, can program your autopilot. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. So here's the real question. Can we program ourselves to be happy?
Sure. You're just overlaying programming that overlays over that survival programming to be fear-based and reactive, and you program yourself essentially to be happy. And if you understand how the human mind works, the mind thrives on order. And so when you create order in the mind, you're happy. When you create disorder in the mind, you're unhappy. And the essence of this 12-minute-a-day technique is that it's creating immense order in your mind. And now is probably a good time to really explain how it works. And so this is how it works. And relating back to the book Think and Grow Rich, the half of the secret he gives you is that everything starts with a thought. Well, when I read that, I'm like, where the heck do you go with that? I mean, I agree with it, but where do you go with that? And so what I realized when I really dug into it over a couple of months is that the real secret of Think and Grow Rich, the central concept, is what you envision in detail on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. And Rocky, what that means is when you step back from your life and you articulate succinctly, here's exactly the person I want to be, exactly what I want to accomplish, and precisely how I'm going to achieve my clearly defined goals. And then you feed that to yourself every day. After about 21 days, the magic happens, the science, the human mind kicks in, and what you're feeding yourself starts showing up automatically without thinking in your daily actions. And those enhanced, improved daily actions create the life you want. I mean, it's powerfully simple. Do you follow that?
I do. So, question for you, because I've heard different answers to how many days you need to do it. I've heard 21. I've heard somewhere in the range of 67 to 68. Right. Some people say longer. Any ideas of what is the perfect number to?
Well, this is what I see. And I'll give you an example of how it impacted my marriage, but this will address that point. One of the things I feed myself with my marriage is to be flexible, patient, and thoughtful. Because I discovered when I got married, I'm getting married in my late 50s, my married friends forgot to tell me that every once in a while your spouse will say something irritating. Have you ever had that experience happen?
I think that happens all the time to all of us, doesn't it? And you know what the worst part of that is?
What?
They come to you with their problem, but they don't want you to fix it.
I know. I get that. Well, it's funny. When it happened to me, I mean, like it was hard enough to get somebody to marry me. I was like, boy, I don't want to, screw this up. And so I started feeding myself every day that I'm going to be flexible, patient, and thoughtful. That's part of my 12-minute routine. Well, Rocky, 15 days in, nothing. I mean, I'm no more flexible, patient, or thoughtful than when I started. But around that 21st day, Ginger says something irritating. And in that moment, I'm flexible, patient, and thoughtful. I mean, that's who I had become. And I think the point of that is that, and I see this with my clients, that 21-day point is sort of critical, because I think before that time, the subconscious mind thinks that the programming is going away, because in the past you've probably done things and tried things and it has gone away. But at some point, the subconscious mind just goes, I give up. Okay, this is just coming to me every day. I'm going to feed it back up automatically without thinking. And so I think, it's not precisely 21 days, but it's, pretty much around that. And I find with my clients, they all say they experience a light bulb moment going on when they notice that, oh, things are happening automatically without thinking. And that always seems to be around 21 days.
And so to make it easier for the audience, and I've used this example in the past, and for those of you who've had to teach kids to drive, you know how nerve-wracking it is to go through that process. But then when you think about it today and you driving, you don't even think about the process. Most of us can't even remember getting there.
Right.
And it's because it has just been memorized. It's been something, and it's part of the 95% that we don't think about except when something comes out of the ordinary when we're driving. Right. And so that's just an example we can all relate to. So what are we supposed to do in these 12 minutes every day?
Well, again, the way it works, the first step is establish immense clarity about your life. Person I want to be, what I want to accomplish, and how I'm going to achieve my goals. And get clarity about that. We use a questionnaire that's very thorough. And then once we get it on the questionnaire, then we take it and put it on our template, so it's more concise and precise, and it's the subconscious mind only responds to stuff that is specific. So if you say, like, I see myself being successful, it doesn't know what that means because it's too general. And so through our template, we're applying NLP, and just it comes out so that it's very succinct and it's articulate, and it typically takes about 12 minutes to fully read it each day. And so that's essentially how it works.
And what exactly are we reading?
You're basically taking your life and dividing it into the 5 areas. You got yourself, your health, your romantic relationship, your spirituality, and your career. And in the yourself part, you're articulating what are your top 3 values, and what attributes do you want to reflect, and then in your health, you're articulating what you want in your health, and your exercise routine, and how you can control your eating. And basically on the front, the ideal you in those 5 areas. On the back, the improvements in each of those 5 areas. And you're also going to articulate your top 3 goals for the quarter. You're essentially living your life quarter to quarter. And so you'll have a goal for your career, a goal for your marriage, a goal for your health, and you'll articulate the why behind each goal, as well as the 4 or 5 key behaviors and a time frame for the goal. And then you're going to track the key behaviors on the bottom of our template. And so, it's a continuous process of sort of, you create clarity when we get it on the template. And then as you read it every day, it evolves as you evolve. You're seeing things deeper and deeper. And as you see them deeper, you change the template. And it's a pretty amazing thing to watch because two things are really happening. One is you're influencing your unconscious daily actions, but you're also tweaking your direction. And so it's pretty powerful.
I did something similar but different, but it was along the same concepts of creating a life plan.
Yeah.
And then once you're done with the life plan, part of what it is it's constantly going through and reading it for weeks to essentially reprogram yourself, right? This is the life I want to lead. This is how I live my life. And again, you pick the areas and you define it. And I have found most people who've gone through the process, even if they don't do it every day, just defining what they want is a major step towards living the life they want. Too often people are picking other people's lives and other people's choices instead of picking their own.
Right. I tell you, this is only for driven people. And the reason I say that, I mean, I didn't always think that, but about 3 years ago, I decided to go meet the top expert in the world on success and show him what I created because I wanted to see if there's something similar to it. Are there flaws that maybe I don't see? And so Darren Hardy is, in my opinion, the top expert in the world on success. So I go see Darren and spend 3 days with him and, sit down with him and show him the template and explain how it works. And he says, John, this is good. As he looks at it, he's like, wow, this is really good. But he says, people aren't going to spend 12 minutes a day on this. And I'm like, Darren, how the heck can that be? It 25x'd my income. Time Magazine did a cover story on the science. We're applying the central concept of the top book in the world on success. I'm like, what do you mean they're not going to spend 12 minutes a day? And, he sort of laughed at me, Rocky, and he says, John, you're new to the success and human achievement field. He says, the dirty little secret is that most people won't do anything to impact their success and achievement in life. He says, for most people, a higher level of success is merely a preference. You got to show this only to driven people where that higher level of success is a necessity. And Rocky, that was so impactful because that turned out to be true. Driven people love what I have. Non-driven people don't care about what I have. And so it was, it's funny how it was so accurate about it.
And the line is 12 minutes a day.
Yeah, right.
And I find that because I've been to many events and you see people who are at these events that cost thousands of dollars. They get excited for the moment and then they go home and it goes back to normal. Nothing changes. And it has always shocked me. That is one of the things that is always like, why won't people do simple little things that will result in dramatic changes? And I think, I don't know what it is, but I have a feeling that 95% of humans just are okay with it.
Yeah, I know. I think you're right. And if you don't mind, could I take my story a little deeper? And I want to share something with you that I didn't share before, but I think it's instructive.
Sure.
So when I was 50, like I said, I'm evaluating my life, but at the same time, my mom was dying of pancreatic cancer, and I'm living in Dallas. So every day I'd go to the hospital to see her, and then I'd do it after work, and then after I spent a couple of hours with her, I'd walk in outside to that dark parking lot and just cry my eyes out. And I didn't want her to see me crying. She probably knew she was dying, but I didn't want her to see that. And, I see that what was going on was, of course, I was feeling the loss of my mom, but I was also seeing all the things that my mom and dad had done for me. They sent me to Jesuit high school in Dallas, and they probably couldn't afford it. They did so much for me, and I'm like, all I've got is the average life. They gave me all the advantages, but all I can seem to muster is the average life. And I got to tell you, Rocky, I hated the average life because I knew I was capable of so much more. But I see that my losing my mom at the same time that I was sort of evaluating my life was the thing that made me go deeper than maybe any other person on the planet has into Think and Grow Rich and figure out the full secret. Because it's interesting. I truly believe that what I created is the top application in the world, of the top book in the world on success. But it doesn't really matter what I think. Fortunately, I got the University of Texas to think it too, which adds a little credibility to it. But I see that when I was sort of evaluating how does what I do stack up against other applications of Think and Grow Rich, I see that the other applications don't even understand the full secret because they didn't go deep enough. And so I found that interesting.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. It is. Now, did you say, is this all in a book?
No, it's not on it. Because I'll tell you.
No, I know it's not in that book. I thought you mentioned you wrote a book. That's why I was confused.
I intentionally have not written a book because I don't think the world needs another book that instructs people. My book is Think and Grow Rich, and I have a course that I take people through to apply it because that's what everybody ultimately wants is change my life, not have me read a book and hopefully figure out how to change it on my own. And so, one of the things I saw when I was 50, again, I'm sort of thinking through, making low six figures a year. And, if you'd asked me to rate myself as an entrepreneur on a scale of 1 to 10, I would have rated myself probably an 8. But when I started netting 7 figures a year, I'm like, whoa, I wasn't an 8. I was closer to a 3 or 4. And it sort of reminded me of that Bill Parcells quote, you are what your record says you are. And so my record was telling me that I wasn't very competent as an entrepreneur. And for me to start netting 7 figures a year, I had to move to working smart rather than just hard. And I discovered there were 7 key habits that I had to apply to myself that I learned once I started netting 7 figures a year. And that's what this methodology makes those habits. Once I teach people the habits, and the methodology makes those habits show up automatically without thinking.
That reminds me of a quote that's something along the lines of, on your last day, the person you became will meet the person you could have become. And seeing all that you missed because of fear, because of doubts, because of something holding you back, or you just not paying, honestly, just not paying attention, not giving yourself 12 minutes a day. So let's talk about it. What are these 7 habits?
I'll give you a few examples. So the first one, the very first one, is you got to focus on what moves the needle. And that takes, thinking about it. And so that's the first one. And then the second one is you got to work on your business rather than in your business. And one of the key ways of doing that is setting aside time to just think. And let me explain how that works, because I'm going to give this gift to your audience to do this. And so this is setting aside time to think 2 times a week. And I'm talking about deep thinking. And, this is a habit the top experts in the world do. People like Elon Musk and Bill Gates. And so here's how it works. You first decide the 2 days a week you're going to do it. I do it on Wednesday mornings and Sunday mornings. Wednesday because I'm halfway through my week. Sunday because I'm just more reflective since it's the weekend. Then the second thing, you decide where you're going to do it. I pick the most comfortable place in my house. I usually do it out on my deck on Lake Austin. But wherever you want to do it, just not in your normal workstation. And then you create your thinking tablet, which is basically a leather binder with blank sheets of paper in it. And so, Rocky, once you're sitting there, and again, each thinking session is going to be about 30 minutes. So as you're sitting there and looking at that blank sheet of paper, you'll do 3 things. The first thing is write whatever comes into your head. Just let it flow. Take 5 or 10 minutes for you to download whatever needs to be downloaded. Then the second step, figure out a question to ask yourself and then write down that question. And then start trying to answer that question. And by posing a question to yourself, it changes how your brain thinks and automatically takes you to a deeper level. And so that usually will take about 20 minutes of answering the question. And then the final thing, the third thing, is just write the 2 or 3 takeaways. Draw a line under the last thing you wrote and write the 2 or 3 takeaways, and then the 2 or 3 action steps, and then go and take those action steps and put them on next week's to-dos, so you're connecting your thinking to taking actions. And the reason this works is because you're giving your subconscious mind an output venue. And what happens is you get your week rolling on Monday and you have a lot coming at you, and you're hearing things, you're talking to people. But Rocky, when it first comes into your consciousness, you may not know its relevance to your life, but you give your subconscious mind a couple of days to process it. Then just watch what happens. What'll happen is you'll go, oh, I was talking to John on Monday and he said such and such. And then your subconscious mind will feed up, here's what that means. Here's how you can use that. But it is a powerful technique. And so, and for your audience, if you'll go to thinkitbeit.com/podcast, you'll see a video that explains this in more detail, and also a guide that shows you what to think about. But this is like the second habit that is critical. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think for a lot of people, just having something to follow and to know is helpful for them.
Right. Well,
because
and
too often people, like, they sit down to do something and they're like, what am I supposed to do? And they spend all their time thinking about what they're supposed to do instead of just doing it.
Yeah, right. It'd be quicker to just do it, right?
Yes.
Well, I'll give you an example on this thinking time, and it sort of relates to the first habit of focusing on what moves the needle. I have a client up in Portland, and he does many warehouses and storage, and he's like a lot of my clients. Half of them are already netting $1 million a year, and half of them are netting 6 figures a year, and he's netting $2 million a year, or what he was when he came to us. And I asked him to do a thinking session around what moves the needle. So he comes back to him and he says, getting properties he's recently acquired, getting them fully developed and leased up, and producing income as quick as possible is what moves the needle. And I'm like, I don't think that's really the case. I think, and so I said, let's do a thinking session together. And so I asked him, I say, what's your special talent? And he says, well, I can see opportunities in storage that other people can't. And so I say, okay, let's just remain quiet and think about that. So we do that for about a minute. And I say, I think what moves the needle is getting more properties in your evaluation pipeline and having metrics around that and a monthly goal. And he took that one idea, which was already in his head, and applied it and made that his laser focus of what moves the needle. And now, just from that one idea, he's netting $4 million a year. But you can see the power of focus and identifying what moves the needle.
And I think this is why people say, I'm working so hard. Why am I not succeeding?
Yeah.
And it's because they're working on the wrong things.
Well, yes, just like me. I was confusing working hard with being competent as an entrepreneur, and I was misguided. I saw that I had to up my game on as an entrepreneur, and I see that one of the things that, and I know you work with entrepreneurs, and I see that oftentimes they come and they're scattered and they're unfocused, and one of the things that I do as I create this clarity and put it on their template is I have them define a number of things about their business. I want them to define, here's what the business looks like 3 years from now. Here's the 4 or 5 milestones to get there. Here's the succinct business plan. Here's the strategy for success. Here's the 2 or 3 things that move the needle. Here's the linchpin issue. Also, maybe the simple mission statement and values. And think about this, Rocky. If you articulate all that to yourself every day and feed it to yourself, it gives you this immense sense of control over your life and your business. And that control translates into confidence. And it's 1,000 times better way of living your life and of being an entrepreneur than being fear-based and scattered. I mean, it's like night and day.
And that makes total sense. What I find with most entrepreneurs is they're running around with their head on fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of, being clear on what they need to do, and just going out and executing. And it all comes down to thinking time. And the power of thinking is really big. And that comes from one of my favorite books, which is The Road Less Stupid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, Keith.
Yeah, Keith is here in Austin, and we've collaborated on this thinking time thing. Yeah, love him.
That is so important. And I find most people just don't make the time or create the space to be able to do that. And I think that's why they struggle so much with all of this. They're running in the 95% of automatic mode, right?
Well, and I tell you, this is what is different with what I think I've created from everything else in the success and human achievement field and from the coaching. Everybody else, I think, is giving people strategies and oftentimes really good strategies, I might add. But, we got strategies coming out your ears. What you need is to have great strategies show up automatically without thinking in your daily thoughts and actions. And that's precisely what makes this different than everything else. And, one of the things I sometimes see is people will say to me, well, this won't work on me. I'm like, this works on everybody. It's pure science. It can't not work. So it works on everybody. But that doesn't mean it's right for everybody in that, the 12 minutes a day is easy. Creating the clarity, and like you alluded to a few minutes ago, a lot of people will just, for whatever reason, will not want to take the time to create that clarity. And that's the hard part. We help people with that, but they got to do it too on their own. And that's why I just don't have much patience with people who say this won't work on me. It works on everybody, but you got to do it.
That's the hard part, getting people to do it.
Right. Well, and don't you think that comes down to the desire for more success? I mean, they got to see that the juice is worth the squeeze, right?
But most of this stuff is so simple. There's not a lot of juice there.
Well, wait a minute. Let's think about this. The juice is a better life, more success, more money, better relationship with your wife, better health. I think there's a lot of juice. The squeeze is the 12 minutes a day.
And I misspoke when I meant that is the squeeze.
Yes, right.
I meant to say the squeeze, not the juice. So that was my misspeaking. Yeah, the juice is wonderful. It's not that hard, but people just, I don't know. It's been one of the things I've struggled with a good part of my life is just understanding this. Because even building wealth is pretty simple, right? Living a good life is pretty simple. I'm like, why do people struggle with just doing some simple stuff?
But Rocky, if the world was full of Rockies and Johns, of course, we think it'd be a great place. But you and I both have a tendency to look at the world like we look at it, and we can't understand why other people aren't driven to maybe do the things that you and I think are so simple. It's just like, Darren Hardy slapping me upside the head and telling me most people aren't going to spend 12 minutes a day. Well, I couldn't, in my pea brain, I couldn't understand that. But him explaining it to me, I'm like, and then after that, I started watching it. I'm like, yes, I see. I need to look at it from other people's point of view, not from mine.
And I think that's where I struggle too, is just that very thing. I look at it from my point of view, and not everyone else does. So one of the things that we chatted about real briefly before we hit record was the negative voice and how many people struggle with that. I'd love to hear your input and what you find. Well,
you and I met through Tommy Breedlove, who is great. And I went to Tommy's men's retreat last week in Atlanta, just outside of Atlanta. And there's 10 guys there. We're there for 4 days. And early in the process, it comes out that all of them have this negative voice in their head that says they're not good enough or they don't deserve success. And I don't have any of that. And because I've programmed it out. But one guy says, I will say things to myself that I wouldn't put up with other people saying to me. And that really hit me, and it made me more determined to do what I do. And I told him, I said, that's ridiculous. Life is hard enough with all the external things you have coming at you. You're making life 10 times harder by not being your biggest supporter and having this negative self-talk. And I said, guys, this has got to stop right now. And let me show you how to stop it. And we had a long discussion about it, and so hopefully I'm making a difference with them. But it made me realize sort of the same you and I just said. If we don't have that negative self-talk, we don't think anybody else does. But I realize the vast majority of people do, and it's a horrible way to live.
And so that comes back to where we started. We are designed for survival. The negativity is designed to keep us safe, not to make us happy. Exactly.
And it's funny. I just got finished out of my class here at the University of Texas. I teach a class on science of creating success and this. And I told them that exact same story 2 hours ago. And I said, well, how many have this negative voice? Where every one of them raised their hand. And we started digging into it. And just what you said is, I think, the foundational reason in that, we're geared for survival, and we're innately wired to be negative. And if you don't put programming over that, that's what's going to come out. And one of the girls, as we were digging into this, was telling me she also had sort of a lousy childhood. Her mom was great, but her dad was lazy, and he was a problem. And that can accentuate the problem if you had a lousy childhood. But I think you nailed it a minute ago. It's coming from innately being wired for survival, and you got to rewire yourself away from that.
We don't get to pick our names. We don't get to pick our physical attributes. We don't get to pick our parents. There's a lot we don't get to pick in life. But, I kind of believe the universe gave us what we needed, and we just need to appreciate it and figure out what is the reason behind what it gave it to us. It gave it to us for a reason. And if we start to utilize that reason and we start to lean into it instead of to fight it, then we have the opportunity to truly have greatness, because we are all unique. And that's why we should stop copying other people, figure out your strengths and what makes you so great, and then bring that gift to the world.
Exactly. Well, and I tell you a quick story as we maybe wrap this up that I know you'll appreciate it. And this happened not too long ago. My stepdaughter has a baby like a week before Christmas. And so Ginger and I go over there the next day. And so the little baby boy is a day old. And so I'm there, and for some reason, Ginger and Hannah leave me alone with the baby. And I'm holding that little boy. I'm like, wow, he's going to live for 100 years. And the life he's going to have is going to be dictated by, his mindset and him taking control of his life and having the proper mindset and also taking personal responsibility for creating the life that he wants. And it just made me appreciate just how precious life is for all of us. And so many of us feel the scarcity of time. And that's why I'm like, can you imagine just playing the game of life at a higher level? And, that's what I'm, passionate about sharing with people, is how to proactively influence the subconscious mind, just as the top book in the world on success says to do, so that you can take your precious life and have the life that you dream of.
So we always like to get people to take action. What's one action step people can take this week to move forward in their life?
Let me give you my email address. But seriously, I think the biggest thing is if people will just step back and maybe go on Google and Google what percentage of my daily actions are unconscious, and see what comes up, and then think, how does that impact my life? Because that was the number one thing in my life that changed my life, was once I saw that 95% of my daily actions are unconscious, and that the cumulative effect of my daily actions is what determines my success. Then life got simple. I'm like, oh, well, this is simple. I just got to program my autopilot and take control of my autopilot. And, my life was never the same once I did that.
And that is an excellent, excellent action step. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
I think the secret is to envision the abundant life and feed that vision to yourself every day.
Yeah, you can't have abundance until you define what abundance is for you.
Right.
And so figure out what it is and then just start planning towards it. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I see that wisdom comes with age. And do I have like 2 minutes to tell you about a story about the opportunity to buy 12% of the Dallas Cowboys?
Sure.
I think you'll find this interesting. But this relates to competence. So, I assume you're probably a Philadelphia fan?
Not Phillies, but more Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Well, I was always a Cowboy fan, and went to see their first game in 1960 with my dad. And so by 1989, Jerry Jones buys the Cowboys, and he buys 80% of them. And he buys them from a guy named Bum Bright, who owned First National Bank of Dallas. But the whole banking business crashed and burned, if you remember, back in the late 80s. And so Bum had to sell it, and so he sells his 80% to Jerry Jones. Well, another 20% was held by some of Bum's friends that had financed their interest at the First National Bank of Dallas. And so, to make a long story short, the FDIC ended up with 12% of the Cowboys. And so, oddly enough, at this time, I own a restaurant in Dallas. And it was dark, and it was sort of New York City, 1940s, is Italian, cool place. And he starts coming in there. So I meet him, of course, and get to know him. And it comes to me, I'm like, here's an idea. Why not go and buy that 12% from the FDIC and put it into a public shell company, and it'd be the first sports franchise ever owned in the public markets. And, the FDIC was asking $10 million for that 12%. And of course, I didn't have $10 million, but I had a relationship with a law firm out in California, Milbanks Tweed, big firm. And I go to them, I go, here's an idea. Why don't you all stroke the check for $10 million out of your partner's pension fund and own, 12% of the Cowboys, and we'll put it in this public shell, and you can do all the securities work around that. And they're like, yeah, this sounds good. And so the arrangement with me was, give me 2% of the 12%. You all take 10%. I get 2% for putting it together. And so I go to the FDIC and I say, I want to buy that 12%. And they go, well, you and everybody else. And they say, well, put up a letter of credit to show us you're serious. I'm like, okay, that won't be a problem. And I go, so let me see the partnership agreement. Well, they don't have the partnership agreement. And I'm like, you're not going to be able to sell this until you get it. So ask Jerry Jones for it. Well, they hem and haw, and they won't do it. And finally, about a month later, I'm like, well, what do I have to lose? I'm going to call Jerry. And so I call him and I say, Jerry, I'd like to swing by this afternoon, just pick up that partnership agreement. I'm going to be buying the 12% of the Cowboys that the FDIC owns. He goes, John, I'm not going to give it to you. And I go, well, Jerry, they can make you give it to them. And he says, I know, but I'm betting they're government employees and they're incompetent. He says, I want to buy that 12%. And I see if I'm horsey with them, I can probably get it at a discount. Well, ultimately, that's the story of the big fish that got away. But here's what's interesting. I see about 10 years later, I'm like, wait a minute, I never needed that partnership agreement to begin with. If I had that to do over again, I would have flown out to LA and visit with the law firm and go, listen, I know it'd be nice to have it, but you don't really need it because the interests that the FDIC acquired were already vetted when First National Bank of Dallas loaned the money on it. And I said, plus, you're lawyers. You can sue them if there's a problem. And the lesson that taught me is that, your competence as a entrepreneur will evolve. If you're 35 years old or 40 years old, your competence as an entrepreneur will become more savvy when you're 50 and even more savvy when you're 60, because you see ultimately that most things don't matter. Just focus on what really does matter and see the big picture.
And that's true. Too often we get hung up in details that are irrelevant. And that's why you need thinking time. Just to say, hey, is this relevant? Is it not relevant? Am I chasing things that I shouldn't be chasing?
Yes. Right. Exactly. That, you're right. It is the thinking time. That's the foundation for everything.
Last question. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I think the piece of wisdom I'd give them is your expectations is going to create the life that evolves for you. So have big expectations and see them in detail. Work on seeing them in detail.
And that makes a ton of sense. When you plan out where you're going, it's much easier to get there.
Exactly.
If people would like to learn more about you and your work, where's the best place for them to do that?
2 places. You can just email me at john@thinkitbeit.com. Or if you'd like to get the gift on the thinking time, go to thinkitbeit.com/podcast.
And we will put those both in the show notes to make it easy for everyone to find you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
What'd you think? Will you apply science to your life? Take action, be the best you can be? I'm constantly growing and improving, and I'm hoping to keep doing that until the day I die. I'm checking out John's program to see how it'll help me improve. This week's action step was see what percentage of your daily actions are unconscious and what can you change. I have to ask, is your program serving you? It's not easy to change. It takes time and perseverance and a support team. I've done this many times in my life, and I still have many more to go. The first step is always a bit challenging. It's figuring out what you're doing and why. Are your thoughts and actions serving you? Many times we don't even realize the programming running in our subconscious and how we are the biggest obstacle to our own success. Reality is we all get to choose the life we want. What are you choosing? And are you working on improving it? Next week, we have Udo Erasmus to talk about how your body needs an oil change. We're going to dive deeper into health and spirituality. Hey, if you enjoyed today's episode, do you know someone else who might enjoy it? Would you mind sharing it? I'd appreciate that. I'm sure the person you share it with will enjoy it too and appreciate you for doing that. Thank you for listening. Have an abundant week.